Hi kids, welcome to Miss Nancy's Bible College for Kids. Today's lesson is in the New Testament. It's in the book of Acts. It's kind of part of chapter 27 and 28. So I'm going to give you the setup of the whole situation, what's going on. Then we'll start the story. So this is a time when the Apostle Paul was taken as a prisoner, and he's on board a ship, and a man named Julius was over Paul, and he treated Paul well. He really did. He gave him liberty and let people be around him, so they were friends. So they launched forth, and the winds started being contrary, because God didn't want them going, I guess. And after they sailed slowly many days, they came to a place called the Fair Havens. When much time was spent, and sailing was now dangerous, Paul admonished them, and that's where we're going to start this story, in verse 10. And Paul, we're talking about, said unto them, Sirs, I perceive that this voyage will be with much hurt and much damage, not only of the lading and the ship, but also of our lives. Nevertheless, the centurion believed the master and the owner of the ship. This guy was wanting to make money. I guess he didn't care. More than those things which were spoken by Paul. And because the haven was not commodious to winter in, the more part advised to depart thence also. If by any means, they're saying in case there's any way we can, that they might attain to Phenice, and there to winter, which is a haven of Crete and lie toward the southwest and northwest. And when the south wind blew softly, supposing that they had obtained their purpose, loosing thence, they sailed close by Crete. But not long after, there arose against it. Oh, guys, I want to stop right here for a minute and say, Miss Nancy's going to tell you the name of a wind, and you can ask people around you, do you know any names of any of the winds that blow? And then you can surprise them and say, I know, and they'll be thinking, what? But it's true. Here's the name, so don't forget it. Euroclydon. And when the ship was caught and could not bear up into the wind, we let her drive. So the ship was in charge of itself, and running under a certain island, which is called Clauda, we had much work to come by the boat, which when they had taken up, they used helps, undergirding the ship, and fearing lest they should fall into the quicksands, strake sail, and so were driven. In other words, the ship was out of control, and it was doing whatever it did. And we, being exceedingly tossed with the tempest, the next day they lightened the ship. And the third day we cast out with our own hands the tackling of the ship. And when neither sun nor stars in many days appeared, and no small tempest lay on us, all hope that we should be saved was then taken away. Boy, that's a scary thing. But you know, there's coming a day when all hope of somebody being saved is going to be gone. And that one will be for true. It'll be too late. Once that door is shut where the saints are going to go up through the air, nobody else is going to get in. And there won't be any praying on earth, no word from no preachers, no witness, because nobody on earth is going to be ready to face what's coming. But we don't have to worry about that because we believe in Jesus. But after long abstinence, that means he stayed away from everything, Paul stood forth in the midst of them and said, Sirs, ye should have hearkened unto me. Have you ever had anybody tell you, you should have listened to me? I told you. Well, that's kind of what Paul was doing. And not have loosed from Crete, and to have gained this harm and loss. So already they've suffered some things. And now I exhort you, be of good cheer. He had good news. For there shall no loss of any man's life among you. For there shall be no loss of any man's life among you, but of the ship. So he's telling them right then, we're going to be okay, but this ship is done for. For there stood by me, this is the reason why Paul knew. For there stood by me this night the angel of God, whose I am and whom I serve, saying, Fear not, Paul, thou must be brought before Caesar, and lo, God hath given thee all them that sail with thee. So he's saying, you're not going to lose any of them, Paul. Wherefore, sirs, be of good cheer. That's the second time he said it. And here's why. For I believe God, that it shall be even as he has told me. Howbeit, we must be cast upon a certain island. But when the 14th night was come, this is 2 weeks long they were sailing, as we were driven up and down in Adria, that ship was still sailing, about midnight. Now the Lord uses midnight in the Bible several times, and I love that. But about midnight the shipmen deemed that they drew near to some country, and sounded, "Whoa!" and found it 20 fathoms. And when they had gone a little further, they sounded again, "Whoa!" and found it 15 fathoms. Then, fearing lest we could have fallen upon rocks, they cast 4 anchors out of the stern and wished for the day. And as the shipmen were about to flee out of the ship, when they had let down the boat into the sea, they were going to get out of there, guys, under colors as though they would have cast anchors out of the foreship. In other words, Miss Nancy's going to break it down. The big ship was letting down a little boat, and they was going to get out of there. But Paul said to the centurion and to the soldiers, "Except these abide in the ship, you cannot be saved." Then the soldiers cut off the ropes of the boat and let her fall off. I love that they say her when they talk about ships or boats. And while the day was coming on, Paul besought them, that means he begged them or suggested strongly, he besought them all to take meat, saying, "This day is the 14th day that ye have tarried and continued fasting, having taken nothing." They hadn't ate in 14 days, guys. "Wherefore, I pray you, take some meat." That'd be good news to me. I love to eat. "For this is for your health, for there shall not an hair fall from the head of any of you." And when he had thus spoken, he took bread, gave thanks to God in the presence of them all, and when he had broken it, he began to eat. Then were they all of good cheer, and they also took some meat. And we were in all in the ship 216 souls, 276 people on board ship. And when they had eaten enough, they lightened the ship and cast out the wheat into the sea. At this point, they didn't care about nothing on that boat. They knew it was their lives if they managed to get that. And when it was day, they knew not the land, but they discovered a certain creek with a shore, into the which they were minded, if it were possible, to thrust in the ship. And when they had taken up the anchors, they committed themselves. Well, guys, I want you to commit yourself to the Lord. Sail on, sail towards heaven. Don't let anything get in your way, because one day it'll be worth it all. You kids pray and you bow your head when you're at school, thank Him for your food. You pray of a night before you go to sleep, and you just keep on going. No matter what anybody around you is doing, God knows it all. And then one day you'll have treasure in heaven when you get there that's waiting on you. So commit yourself. So they committed themselves into the sea, and they loosed the rudder bands and hoisted up the mainsail to the wind and made toward shore. I love it when they talk this boat stuff. And falling into a place where 2 seas met, they ran the ship aground, and the forepart stuck fast and remained unmovable, but the hinder part was broken with the violence of the waves. The boat broke in half. And the soldiers' counsel was to kill the prisoners, lest any of them should swim out and escape. But the centurion, willing to save Paul, kept them from their purpose, and commanded that they which should swim should cast themselves first into the sea and get to land. So this is because of Julius. He had mercy because of Paul. And the rest, some on boards and some on broken pieces of ship. And so it came to pass that they all escaped to land, just like God had told Paul and Paul had told them. And when they were escaped, then they knew that the island was called Melita. And the barbarous people showed us no little kindness, for they kindled a fire and received us every one, and here's why: because of the present rain and because of the cold. And when Paul had gathered a bundle of sticks and laid them on the fire, there came a viper out of the heat and fastened on his hand. And when the barbarians saw the venomous beast hang on his hand, They said among themselves, "No doubt this man is a murderer, whom though he had escaped the sea, yet vengeance suffered him not to live." And he shook off the beast into the fire and felt no harm. Howbeit, they looked when he should have swollen or fallen down dead suddenly. But after they had looked a great while and saw no harm come to him, they changed their mind and said it was a god. Boy, that's people for you. He's a devil. He's a god. Man, what a mess we are. In the same quarters were possessions of the chief man of the island, whose name was Publius, who received us and lodged us 3 days courteously. Oh, I love that 3 days part. That's in the Bible a lot of times. And it came to pass that the father-in-law of Publius lay sick of the fever and of a bloody flux, to whom Paul entered in and prayed and laid his hands on him and healed him. I bet Publius was so glad about this. So, when this was done, others also, which had diseases in the island, came and were healed. Isn't that a great story, guys? I hope you like it. I love this. I call it Shipwrecked. Some people in life, they are shipwrecked. But you know what? God can salvage any ship. You've never went too far. You've never done too much bad for God not to reach you. Please get right with God before it's too late. What was Paul, the man of God? What was his situation in this story? He was a prisoner on board a ship, wasn't he? And who was over him? Julius, remember? Did he treat Paul good? Yes, he did. He let him go free on the ship and everything, and he let people come around him. So that's pretty good for a prisoner. But when they got to a place called the Fair Havens, what did Paul tell them? He said, if you sail, you're going to cost lives and you're going to cost this ship. Did they believe Paul or did they believe the owner of the ship? They believed the owner of the ship more than Paul, didn't they? So they set sail. And what was some of the things that were happening to the ship? And why did they leave the island? Because it was winter. And then what came along? And you know the name of it. A wind. And what was the name of it? Euroclydon. Remember that. Anyway, so the ship was caught up, and what happened? Who was driving it? The ship itself. It just, nobody could control it because the waves were so bad. It was just doing what it had to. But after many days, no sun, no stars appeared. They lost hope. But then what did Paul tell them? You should have listened to me. I told you, but you didn't. But then he said, don't worry, no one's going to die, but we will lose this ship. And who told Paul this? The angel of God visited him and told him. And on the 14th night, about what time, what did they think that they'd found? After 14 days and nights, and the ship just going everywhere, they finally thought that they had found land. And so how many anchors did they drop? 4 anchors. And what did the shipmen let down out of the boat? Actually, I got that backwards, I guess. What did they let out of the ship? The little boat. They were going to escape. What did Paul tell them? He said, if you're going to live, you better stay on board the ship. So what did they do? They cut that boat off and let her fly, didn't they? After that, what did Paul tell them that they needed to do? He said, you need to take something to eat. You're going to need the strength. So he took some bread and he broke it and he blessed it. And they all did eat, didn't they? Anyway, how many people were on board this ship? 276 people. Man, that's a lot. After the 4 anchors was taken up, then they said, what happened to the ship? When they took up the anchors and they started sailing towards the island, the front of it stuck and the back of it broke off, didn't it? So they did lose the ship, just like Paul said. What was the guards or the soldiers going to do to the prisoners at this point? They were going to kill them, wasn't they? But who stopped them? Julius. Julius did. So what did they do? The ones that could swim went first, and they swam, and the other ones got pieces of boards or whatever came off the ship, and they got to the island, and how many of them died? None, just like Paul said, because God told him. So when Paul was building the fire on the island, and what was the island's name? Melita. And when he was building the fire, what happened? The viper got him. And then the people sat and they said, "Ha, he's a murderer. Look, even though he's spared from the sea, that snake's going to kill him." Then they waited a while. They didn't see no swelling. He didn't fall to the ground dead. Then what did they think? Oh, he's a god. Man, people are crazy. Anyway, what happened with Publius' father-in-law or father, whichever it was? The father, it was his father. I'm sorry about that, guys. I just lost it for a minute. He was sick and he had a bloody flux. And what did Paul do for him? He healed him, didn't he? And then what happened? Just like when Jesus was walking on earth, people heard about this, and everybody on the island came to be healed. Well, this guy treated Paul good. I'm sure we're going to meet him someday. We're going to meet Paul. Paul is our apostle. He's the one that gave us a lot of the Word of God because God put it on him. So I hope that you guys are ready to go. Don't let your life get shipwrecked. Sail on towards heaven. Ask Jesus to save you. He will. He promises he will if you ask him. So I'll see you next time. Thanks, guys. Bye, kids.